And the one now. We'll be speaking to a guest in Ramallah on the West Bank, Marin Margouti, in a few minutes' time. Before that, though, let's speak to Shah Azani, the former Israeli diplomat in the United States and the UK. Thanks for joining us on BBC News. Interesting listening to President Biden, who was talking about the quiet diplomacy. Do you think that Bibi Netanyahu was pushed into this, though, by America without reaching Israel's military objectives, given the dialing up of language used by Biden in the last 24, 48 hours?
Well, it's a pleasure to join you tonight. I have to tell you that the Prime Minister Netanyahu would not be pushed into any position by compromising the Israeli security. And my belief is that once Israel agreed to move forward with the unconditional ceasefire, it felt it is able to do so based on achieving the military goals of the operation at this point.
Well, just explain then what the military goals were over the last 11, 12 days and what has been achieved. Because as far as I can tell, and people on the ground, the Hamas metro, that network of tunnels, which is one of the military aims to be destroyed, hasn't been. I mean, some has, but not all of it.
Well, remember that Hamas has over 1,000 kilometers of tunnels. There was never an indication or statement by Israel that everything was destroyed. But make no mistake, Hamas's propaganda is clear. It is usual, and we've seen it many a time. But Israel has dealt Hamas a significant blow on a variety of levels. Some were able to share, some not. With regards to its capability to attack Israel, Hamas has tried to use not only its long-range missiles, but also tunnels and UAVs. It has failed on all of these items, including attacks from the sea and otherwise, and it knows the kind of blow that it got from the IDF.
But that's what Israel said its targets were in 2014, to prevent Hamas waging any future violence. 7 years later, and all the way since 2014, it hasn't it?
And you are correct. There is great frustration by Hamas's continuous attacks against Israel, and there is a great desire in Israel that we will be able to achieve a peaceful resolution and a peaceful coexistence. Remember, this entire situation doesn't only go back to 2014, it goes to 2012, it goes to 2009, and it goes to 2005.
Which just takes me back to my point. I'm sorry, Shah Azani. Israel didn't fulfill its military aims.
Well, Israel has decided to use its power in a moderate manner. Obviously, Israel could have done other things differently in order to cause more damage to Hamas, which would have come at more cost to civilian population. And Israel has a very high ethical code when it comes to using the IDF. But I just want to remind our viewers of 2005, when Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza. And in this regard, the cause for Palestinians in Israel is really one and the same: to demilitarize Gaza and make sure that Hamas focuses on taking care of its civilian population rather than invest in building this military infrastructure that leads them nowhere. You've seen the destruction in Gaza. Once they leave the metro area, they look around them and they see rubbles. And this is terrible for Gazans and terrible for Israel as well. So if Hamas chooses to take a step back from the cycle of violence and use the cement that Israel brings into the Gaza Strip, not to build tunnels, but rather to build hospitals and schools, then you will see a whole different situation. And relating to what President Biden just said, we are indeed hopeful that Hamas will not be able to restock its missiles and that it will focus on the civilian infrastructure. Believe you me, when Israel left Gaza in 2005, the verse was Singapore of the Middle East. In a couple of years, we received Hamastan. That came at a heavy cost for Israelis as well as Palestinians.
OK, we must leave it there. Shah Azani, thanks very much indeed for joining us on BBC News. Let's speak to Marin Margouti, a Palestinian researcher and writer. She joins us from the West Bank.